Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, episode number 72, January 16th, 2022. Jay, what is going on?
What's up? Back at it again, not quite as big of a gap this time in between shows, trying to get back on this regularly. And we got a little bit to talk about today. Kerry, where do you want to start?
Let's start with, one of our favorite personalities, someone that we've always been a huge fan of. Even though he wasn't involved with the Texas program, we always just really admired him and admired his personality and, just everything that he's accomplished. And that's Gary Patterson. I know you personally are a huge fan. You've always been a huge fan of Gary Patterson. Do you want to get into, we had been discussing this about him potentially, hopping in the wagon and coming down the old trail to Austin from Fort Worth. So sounds like that might be happening. Jay, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, man, it's this Gary Patterson, somebody that we've cussed up and down on multiple occasions, talk a little trash about, especially the single, the country single that he dropped, Take a Step Back.
Is that still on the charts? Like, is that still charting, or has that fallen out? I know it's been a while.
It might not be on the Billboard Top 200 anymore, but we'll check that out. We'll get our research department on that. Excuse me. And by the next show, we'll have an answer there.
Or not, we might just completely forget about it.
Yeah, probably that one. No, because I'm going to sing that song all until he leaves, and probably after. So I won't. I'm not letting that one go. And we were saying before in pre-show that we kind of hope they play it as they announce him, or whatever, and smoke coming out of the tunnel, Bevo leading him out with the flag, and then Gary Patterson, who's already covered in 4 gallons of sweat, comes onto the field and makes his grand entrance. But
the Palm Squad, instead of like the Palms, have like just towels.
Yeah, drying him as he runs through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sham wow, so he can just grab it and wipe himself down, and then just twist it out and do it again.
What if Nike and Texas collaborate on like a ShamWow material, like outfit for him?
Oh, a whole outfit.
Like
a whole ShamWow deal.
Yeah, this is Texas. I know that TCU up there, they got to watch their budget and cut coupons and those kinds of things for running their athletic department.
Not down here.
There's no money up there at TCU. So like in Austin, why can't like Nike and Texas collaborate on something, for Gary Patterson, like a ShamWow based sideline outfit or anything, to where he doesn't even need all the towels. Like it just soaks up. Like he just keeps them dry.
Let's keep an eye out for that. Let's keep an eye out for that happening. And
I'll tweet at Chris Del Conte about that. I'll give him a shout on Twitter and see what he thinks.
He'll probably answer you. He answers everybody else and every other dumb question that gets thrown his way. So he'll probably answer you. There's something to be said about interacting with the public, and there's something
it's miserable.
To be said about just interacting with the public. Yeah, exactly. Like who?
Yeah, it sucks. Who wants to do that?
Chris Del Conte, man of the people. We talked about it here. When I ran into him at the drum, and when he told me that we were going to do it, and I said, okay, let's do it. And maybe we'll get the same response on the ShamWow outfit. But when we're talking about Patterson here, I actually think, and I want to get your take on this. I think this is a great hire, honestly, to come in, and there's a job. It's not official yet, but the job has been posted online. Special assistant to the head coach.
Did you apply?
I did not apply. I was working on shining up my resume a little bit, but I did not actually complete the application yet. I didn't, I think Gary Patterson at this point in time might be a better fit than me anyway. I don't think it'd be fair to the program, at this point in time. But the next time a job like this opens up, I may end up throwing my name in the hat.
A killer cover letter can make up for any resume deficiencies.
Yeah,
if you just, it's just a special assistant to the head coach job.
I think all the cover letter would have to say is like hashtag all gas, no brakes, and you might get the gig, man, at this rate. Like, but Kerry, what are you feeling about this? Like, are you
No,
liking this? Are you digging this? Or
jokes
what?
aside, I think it's a great hire. I think that, I mean, we're talking about it like it's official, and obviously it hadn't been made official yet, but it's supposed to be any time now. I'm a huge fan of it. I think this is the kind of hire that Texas, like, we talked about for years and years now about like how programs, and again, I know it's tough to compare to Alabama and everything that they've done, but like what they would do in the analyst game, they would go out and get these, football minds that either had just left jobs or for whatever it is, and they get into analyst roles and then they get onto the staff. And then, I mean, Sark's a perfect example of that. And there are countless others that have gone through this system. But so it was always a wonder, like, why wasn't Texas kind of approaching this whole, like, finding ways to add minds into the program to get another set of eyes on it and build out this kind of analyst apparatus. And this is, I know it's not an analyst role, it's a special assistant to the head coach. So I think there's going to be more involvement there maybe than an analyst role, but I think it's great. And to go and like convince somebody that basically had spent the last, I mean, God, how many years was he at TCU? Like
21, something like that. 19. It was in that 20 range. I
yeah,
think.
to get a guy that spent every year on the recruiting trail negatively recruiting Texas to the highest degree, to then convince him to come be a special assistant to the head coach. There's a statue of him in Fort Worth, and he's coming to Austin to be a special assistant to the head coach. So that's a hell of a sell job by Sark on one side of it. And I'm sure Chris Del Conte and all that with his relationship he had at TCU with him. But to be able to convince this guy to come down to Austin and like, oh, well, maybe what you were saying about Texas for the last 19, however many years it wasn't so bad. But I think it's great. It's a guy that, you don't know what, if he wants to be a head coach anywhere else, if he wants to deal with those kinds of things. Like this seems like just a perfect, almost like they designed the role for him. Like, hey,
yeah,
we know you want to stay involved in football, but you might not want to be a coach on the day-to-day, on the sidelines every week. What about working, on this staff, working on film breakdown, providing some input? He knows the conference inside and out. Like, he knows the recruiting landscape here. And when you talk about this defense with Kwiatkowski, and like that maybe isn't incredibly familiar with the landscape in the Big 12 and in the state of Texas recruiting wise, I think this covers a lot of bases. I think we're going to see instant impact for how this defense looks next season, which isn't really saying much given how they looked last year. But I think this is it's gonna be worth every penny that Belmont, whatever they're gonna pay Gary Patterson to basically come in and fix this thing. And then who knows where it goes from there.
Your point about finally learning how to capitalize on this system with analysts and things like that. Like Alabama's Nick Saban's been ahead of this curve for years, and that's not by accident. It's because, in Texas, where in the social media era, you had Charlie Strong, who refused to do anything on social media and was behind the times there. And then you go to Tom Herman, who, if you didn't know that he was the smartest guy in the room, you could just ask him and he would tell you that he was. So he didn't necessarily feel the need to fill his staff with people like this. He's like, well, I'm just going to put my coaches together and then I got this.
Well, he surrounded himself with people that thought like him and that were, I mean, he's an Urban Meyer disciple, and you look at the way that Urban Meyer's always ran, even going to the NFL with his whole circle the wagons, and that's how Tom Herman was. It was like if you weren't a like-minded thinker like him or within his kind of circle, then there was no interest whatsoever of any like outside opinion or input,
Right. And that's how we were talking last show about how, bringing in people that, bringing in coaches that have different ways of looking at things, and the wide receiver coach that's coming in that has the go-go offense, and bringing it, that can add something to what Steve Sarkisian's already doing, not being afraid to expand your horizons and allow for outside input and to always be willing to grow as a coach. Nick Saban, it's not an accident that he's been able to win as much as he has because he's not afraid to evolve. He's not afraid to find different ways to win. I mean, like, it helps that you have you're always in the top of the country in the trenches in terms of just the types of players that you have and the recruits that you have. That helps. But he's shown that he can win multiple ways and with multiple, with Saban, with the way that the coaches leave every single year, he has to be able to do that. He has to be flexible and learn how to adapt to that because people are always poaching his coaches, like Steve Sarkisian. So, like, the fact that Sarkisian's willing to bring in a guy like Patterson, who, again, like you said, has spent the majority of 2 decades negatively recruiting against Texas, to be able to bring him in and not be afraid to say, hey, like, I know, we coached against each other and you've been coaching against the school for a long time, but I feel like you can be the guy that can help us, that can help me, can help my staff get over this hump, because it didn't work last year, man. Let's go do it. And the Chris Del Conte relationship from TCU, from his time at TCU, it also does not hurt in this situation.
No.
So kudos to Sark for what it looks like is basically a done deal here. And I read reports that Patterson was already like the first guy in the office. Like, he's already sort of started doing some stuff, and he was already like the first guy at Belmont one day last week. And it just shows you, like, this guy is going to come in, and because I almost feel like with the way that things ended at TCU for him, he's really looking to wipe the slate clean and get that taste out of his mouth and feel what it's like to be successful again at a high level. And if he can do that here, even if it's for a year, who knows if he's going to want to go be a head coach somewhere, because he won't have trouble finding a job if he does. But for the fact that he's willing to come here right now and work alongside Steve Sarkisian and the rest of this coaching staff, I think it really speaks volumes for Sark and CDC and hopefully the direction of where this program is headed. So, yeah, man, it's, for me, we talk a lot of trash about the guy, but now it's now he's our guy.
Yeah,
Excuse me. So
exactly.
we're got to embrace it. And I agree with you that we're going to see some immediate impact here in this program, whether it's from a discipline standpoint, whether it's from a, directly on the defensive side of the ball, or whatever it is. Like, we're going to see a difference made, and I'm excited for this hire. So,
in real quick on Pat, but also like talent evaluation. You think about what he did at TCU with the recruits that they were able to get and who he turned into, really, really good players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So you talk about talent evaluation and development, but real quick on him, I think you made a great point about the way things ended at TCU. I think if it was a case where he was able to where he would leave on his own terms, I think he probably would have called it a career. He accomplished just about everything you could possibly ask for at TCU within reason. And,
sure.
But I think with the way that it ended, you have to think that he's a guy that wants to go prove himself again. And who knows where this leads, who knows where this goes. I mean, I don't know if this is ever going to be a case where he gets promoted into some kind of defensive coordinator spot at Texas. That would mean something maybe went wrong with Kwiatkowski down the road. We're not anywhere close to any of that at this point, but you don't know what you're a competitive guy like him is going to want to prove his point that, like, the way things ended at TCU was not the way that he wanted things to end.
Right.
He'd been there for so long. You think he wanted to get fired mid-season and towards the tail end of his tenure there? Absolutely not.
I've got to question that too. Like, the way that TCU handled that, I really have to question, like, unless it was just so toxic, like, unless it was just unless he was just being a punk to everybody around. And
well,
Like, I mean,
We don't know.
yeah, we don't, but like, honestly, like, it almost seemed like they were in such a hurry to get that job vacant so they could get the guy that they wanted to in a coaching market that was going to fill up quickly with some of these guys that, and then, I feel like at TCU, if you know who you want and you know you're going to go get him, and if it's, Sonny Dykes is your guy and that's who you knew you wanted already, then okay. But like,
They could have got Sonny Dykes after the season.
bingo. Like, you telling me you couldn't get Sonny Dykes after the season? Set it up, man. Tell Patterson, hey, man, like, thanks for your
We're moving
commitment to
on.
this university. We're going to move on. We're not going to announce anything until the last week of the season. We want this to all be good. And maybe they did that. And maybe he was like, screw you. Like,
We don't know.
We don't know. Maybe that's what they did. And he was like, screw that. I ain't finishing this. I'm not going to be a lame duck coach. Like, I'm not
Right.
doing that. So that might have happened that way. But either way, it's worked out good for Texas. And I think that, like you said, we'll see dividends pretty quickly here. So let's move on a little bit here to some recruiting. We're in this transfer portal action here, and Texas has had a couple of swings and misses here in terms of targets at key positions. We talk about Mario Williams, the wide receiver at Oklahoma, who entered and basically followed Lincoln Riley now to USC, and will probably end up with his old quarterback Caleb Williams. I don't think has made that official yet to USC, but it's widely assumed that the former Oklahoma quarterback Caleb Williams will follow Lincoln Riley to USC. Quickly on like the wide receiver room, and we've talked about this briefly before. Does Texas still need to get a receiver out of this portal for you to feel comfortable? Like, just somebody with some sort of production, or
I mean,
it's just, what?
I'm not going to say no. I mean, my stance on, especially with the portal action and everything is like, if you've got a position to need, I mean, throw bodies at it. If you can't, if you've got the space to do it, you're building the roster, or, you're seeing enough attrition to where you have room to do it, throw bodies at it, because the wide receiver room needs that badly. And I think the Mario Williams thing, that's exactly how this whole thing was going to play out. Him visiting Texas, all that kind of stuff, that was all basically for show. Basically like, oh, see, I'm all going, it's the due process. It's all, I'm being diligent in my search. Yeah, right. You were going to USC the entire time. So I can't be too mad about like Texas missing on Mario Williams. Like, that was just that was never going to happen. But yeah, I think, God, there's so much portal action happening too, that it's like, there can be some players that come up here soon that like weren't even on the radar. And judging by how Sark and the staff has approached the transfer portal, you'd have to think they've got some names on their radar that are like, they have to have some players in mind to come in and try to bolster this wide receiver room. So what do you think? I mean, do you try to get a person or two in from the portal, or do you try to go with what's there and try to build, try to develop it at this point?
Yeah, I'm not forcing anything. I'm not taking somebody, and I know that's not what you were getting at either, but I'm not taking somebody just for the sake of saying, well, we took a receiver out of the portal.
No, they got to be someone who can play. I mean,
it's got to be somebody that can fit in with the scheme and the speed and all the things that, like, Xavier Worthy, I'm not saying that type of player, but that level of player. But like, that's the Steve Sarkisian. If you build a football player, a wide receiver from scratch for his offense, Xavier Worthy is the guy that you would look at. And Xavier Worthy might not necessarily be prototypical for every offense in this country, but he definitely works in this offense. And so I think you got to try to find a fit. And if you find it, you find it. And if not, you're sort of looking at, gosh, like if you can get 7 or 8 games out of Jordan Whittington, it's just like at this point you don't really feel like we're sort of resigned to the fact that Whittington is just a walking hamstring, right? Like, I mean, it is what it is, and that's
Yeah.
sort of the downside of this. But you know, there are catches to be had. Period. Like, and this was something that we looked at it coming out of spring ball last year that we said, hey, if everything goes right, this wide receiver room could exceed expectations. Well, it did. It went the opposite direction. It went the exact opposite direction. So how do you find a way to, you know, is it somebody on campus? Is it some, you know, whatever that, I don't know. Sarkisian's going to have a handful there to.
That's why I think
try
they
to figure that
have
out,
to
but-
have everything that they've shown so far shows that they have been fully aware of roster deficiencies and how to address them.
Mhm.
And whether it's somebody that's in the portal right now or somebody that'll be coming in, there's going to be a flood of players that are going to be hitting the portal after spring ball. It's, you know, this first wave right now of
Mhm.
players that have left. We'll get to the guys from Alabama that have hit the portal, but this wave of players that have left after, you know, the fall semester and, you know, Christmas break has ended. We're going to have even more players after spring ball that realize that they're maybe not where they want to be on certain depth charts and that they're going to want to go play somewhere, and you can get them in for summer. So Sark has shown that they're monitoring and that they watch who's hitting the portal. I'm sure they already have, like, that's why you hire these analysts and these, you know, this staff is like, keep an eye, you know, find us some players who might be, you know, here in the next couple months, some targets that we could go ahead and keep an eye out for. I think they'll address it. I think I completely agree with you. It's not just going to be bringing in a receiver for the sake of bringing someone in. You got to have someone more productive than, like, you know, Tariq Black when he came onto campus. You know, a player, you know, it's like, well, was that really worth, you know, the scholarship spot at that point? Different staff, but you
Right.
get what I mean. So it's,
Sure.
I think they will, but because I want to talk about these Alabama guys here in a minute. Let's talk about some of the non-transfer recruiting action, which is kind of funny though. Like, portal stuff has almost become more interesting than, like, high
That's where
school
we
recruiting.
are now, right? Yeah, that's where we are. I mean, it really is. I agree with you there. Yeah, man. Who was Larry Turner Gooden, 4-star safety committed.
One of the best nicknames.
Yeah, hyphen. I love that. I mean, like, that to me was a guy that Texas needed to get at a position of need, and is basically was the next to last piece in this recruiting class in terms of being able to finish this strong. And hey, Wally, being able to finish this strong. And how are you feeling that Texas was able to? I mean, it was sort of rumored. He's been linked to Texas for a while. This is a good one, right? You're feeling good about this?
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's, you know, he's technically classified as an athlete. So
Right.
I think from everything that I've heard of him, solid player, can play in some different areas, especially on, you know, on the defensive backfield, which having that kind of flexibility is always a good thing.
Mhm.
You think about what this staff was able to do with someone like Anthony Cook, who, you know, kind of never really found a consistent role previously, and they were kind of able to move him around into some spots that was able to fit his skill set. I think that's going to be, I wouldn't call Turner Gooden like an Anthony Cook type of player necessarily, but like, I like the versatility that he's going to bring on defense, and you know, the defensive backfield needs as much help as it can get. So
Yeah, you aren't lying, and it never hurts to have guys that can play multi-positional. You know, it never hurts to have multi-positional guys. It never hurts to have people that you can just plug and play in different places, and just the overall ability. Okay, I just don't have to put him on the outside. I just don't have to put him in as a safety.
right.
He's a guy that can. You know, he can be around the football no matter where you put him, and I feel like you gotta like the fact that Texas was able to finally get that taken care of. The big one though here towards the end of this cycle now is the 5-star guard. He's interior lineman wise. He's depending on what service you look at, he's really viewed as the top interior lineman in this class in the nation, and really a top 2 or 3 linemen overall. Again, depending on what service you look at, but Devin Campbell, who has been down to 2 teams for a while now between Texas and Oklahoma, and Kerry, this is one of the ones. This is one of the battles that if the program is going to overcome the reputation of not having those guys in the trenches, like this would be a great place to start. And we've been talking about Campbell for a while now, and we're getting closer and closer to it. So that's just, to me, that's just the biggest question mark right now, is we're just holding, like, this is what makes when we talk about the transfer portal being now it's like, this guy is one that, well, this brings me back to paying more attention to the high school
Right.
stuff quite a bit.
Right.
And so anyways, what are you feeling about Campbell? Have you heard anything one way or the other?
No, I mean, it sounds like Texas is still in a good spot, and this is just, I wouldn't be surprised if the guy's already got the decision made up in his mind. He's just saving this for signing day and all those things. But like, maybe this just might be, like preparing myself, and always kind of, I don't want to be, pessimistic, but like this offensive line class is already badass for Texas.
Mhm.
Like, adding Campbell to it is just, I mean, icing on the cake.
That's
Like,
a big cherry on top.
exactly. So it's one of those things, like, if you miss out on Campbell, it's not the end of the world. It's not like this was the only 5-star, top tier offensive lineman that Texas was in on, and you swing and miss on him, and now you're left with a bunch of, scrubs coming in, because that's not the case. Like, this has already been a really solid offensive line class. It would be a bummer to miss out on Campbell, but I feel good about it. I think Texas is in a good spot here. Just got to wait for the announcement. So.
Yep. Play the hat game, the shell game, or
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
he's gonna do. He may, judging by the way that he's dragging this out, I'm sure it will be a big ordeal, but it could just be something as simple as just a social media post,
Respect
or whatever.
my decision post.
Yeah,
And
hashtag respect, hashtag bless, hashtag whatever.
hashtag respect my bless. No interviews,
respect
please.
my bless. No, hashtag no interviews, please. Yeah, exactly. So, but a couple more things on the recruiting front. You said you wanted to touch on some of these guys in the portal from Bama.
Yeah, the Alabama exodus continues. I mean, after their playoff final loss, I mean, God, it seemed like how many players from Bama hit the portal or announced to go pro. But I mean, not that it's going to hurt that program at all. They just reload. But
Right.
but the thing is, now with the portal, you're going to have a lot of these players that are like, that have been top tier recruits that just can't crack the starting lineup at a place like Alabama, and they want to go play somewhere. And possibly with somebody that they have familiarity with. I mean, we talk about the tight end, Jaleel Billingsley. That was a Sark recruit. I think it was actually Jeff Banks' recruit that he was technically the recruiter on this one. So already some familiarity with Gia, and that wouldn't be any issue, coming on
Is
to
Gia the
campus.
monkey on the Zoom call or the official visit? I mean, or do you think
be,
Gia
man.
would be live in person?
She better
or
be.
Is that like a does
You got the poll in the background for poll assassin.
Gia on Twitter? Yeah, exactly. Like,
I mean,
if you're gonna do it, go all out here.
All gas, man.
Yeah, right here.
All Gia, no brakes.
It says it on the cup. All Gia, no brakes. It says it right there. So, but yeah, man. So Billingsley was on the offensive side of the ball, and then there's somebody on defense too at a position of need as well.
Yeah, Drew Sanders. God, this would be a good get for Texas. This one, from my understanding, Texas is in a good spot, but there is some competition. Oklahoma and Arkansas are the two names that I saw. Sanders has some familiarity with the OU staff. And I think he was committed there before he eventually ended up going to Bama. So we'll see, but it sounds like Texas is getting the last visit, and that Texas is in a really good spot with him. I mean, that'd be a huge get. Talk about adding a guy that can just come off the edge and attack. And something we talked about this pass rush last season with with this defense being an issue, to say the least. I mean, and to have a true edge guy, both of these would be huge gets. I mean, the Billingsley one maybe doesn't get a lot of run, but you talk about being able to help out that wide receiver room, and you lose Jared Wiley. He goes to TCU, and this tight end room opens up a little bit. Brewer's not back for another year, is he? Is he coming back for like his 7th season or something like that? Or is he?
Pretty sure he is, isn't he? Doesn't he have another year?
I don't know. I mean, I think he was a senior last season, but I don't know, the extra COVID year or whatever. But
it's hard to keep track of this stuff right now until we get out of this cycle with the COVID years and stuff. It's going to be hard to pin that down. But I'm pretty sure Brewer has another year.
Well, the thing is like Texas runs enough 2 tight end that this bringing Billingsley in is not going to kill the like tight end careers of someone like Juan Davis. I do think Jatavion Sanders eventually, there needs to be a discussion about eventually getting him on the defensive side of the ball.
Agreed.
I mean, Gunnar Helm, these guys are still going to see the field. Bringing Billingsley in is not going to like send some of these young tight ends off into the portal. I don't think.
I agree.
So, but yeah, you get an experienced guy, a talented player like that, get him in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just you get these guys with this sort of talent on, and you deal with it later. You figure it out, and if your coaching staff is putting guys into positions to be successful like they should be, this is the kind of guy that just get them on campus and work it out. From the defense on the defensive side of the ball, which is obviously needed. Like this is. Again, if Texas is just a middle of the road defense last year in the Big 12, we're having a different conversation about how that it still wasn't going to be a 10-win year. But if this defense just isn't last ass place in the Big 12, it just isn't that bad. The team on the whole is not that far away from being able to take that step forward. And when you got guys that have shown they can do it at a higher level, bring them in, work it out, make it happen. And that's another reason why you bring a Gary Patterson on, because you're finding those little those little things in their skill sets. That's what Patterson did, like you hit on earlier, was you take guys that have certain skill sets, and then you take them and you mold them into what you need them to do, revolving around those skill sets. And if they pick up these other bits along the way, that's great. But you find guys that do certain things really well, and then you help them exploit their opponents using those skills. And that's one of these things where you get these guys on campus and make it happen. I mean, all these transfers haven't been 100% hits, like last year specifically either. But I mean, you've got
I thought
7
Thornton
spots.
was a raving success. What are you talking about?
I refuse. I'm not even going to say the guy's name on the show.
Not taking the bait, huh?
I'm not doing it. Doing it, man. Not going to do it. Not
going
to do it because I know he's probably a good guy, and I don't want to do it.
Well, I think exactly to your point, this is the perfect way to upgrade over Jet Bush and Brockermeyer type player. But this is what, when people talk about this defense, and it's like, you had those 2 players starting on this defense. Gosh. And that never really came off the field because the guys behind them weren't performing either. And it's no fault of these guys. Like, I'm not saying this to like bash on Jet Bush and Brockermeyer.
No.
They're hard workers. They've done, but they are what they are. And if Texas wants to be competing for a Big 12 championship and eventually, further on than that, and eventually, and soon enough in the SEC, you have to have players better than that. You just have to.
Period. Yep.
And what do you do to get an instant upgrade on that? You attack the portal. You go after guys like Drew Sanders. You go after guys like Mathis from TCU. You talk about adding those two guys on this defense, it immediately looks different.
Yep.
It's what you have to do. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Where it's, yeah, this portal stuff, man. This portal stuff. These
Back
kids.
in my day, we didn't have a portal.
Back in my day, you had to sit for 3 years before the coach would let you see the field.
Yeah.
Or at least past the Oklahoma game if you're a freshman under Mac.
Well, I'm just not ready for the big time. Got to wait a little bit. Can't throw the freshman out to the wolves.
Freshmen can't do interviews. Not going to let them
Gotta
interview.
sit
They're
'em.
too young.
No, can't handle the media. Can't do it. It's an tackling's an epidemic.
Scares you to death.
Dumbass.
All right.
Love
Let's
you,
get into
Max, but
something a little less infuriating. Let's talk some Texas basketball.
Is it though?
Let's talk some Runnin Horns. Well, since the last time we filmed, Texas is 1-2. One win at home and 2 losses on the road. They go up to Oklahoma State. That was not pretty in Stillwater. Not pretty. It's going to become a theme, I feel like, in this conversation, because what we saw in Stillwater, well, me and you were in attendance for the Oklahoma game, which was a great win. I mean, 14-point win over Oklahoma, who just came off of beating Iowa State. I mean, it's the big, we hit on this theme every week about the Big 12 being just an absolute bloodbath. Like, it's murderer's row of opponents every game. So, okay, you go to Stillwater and lose. That was, all right. It's shots weren't falling, but the effort was there. It was one of those ones where you go like, it just wasn't your day. Like, it couldn't be. I wasn't too mad about the Oklahoma State thing in a vacuum. Like, those kind of games happen. They still held the Cowboys to 64 points. Not, it wasn't bad. And it's then especially coming off the Oklahoma game where you go, okay, well, they basically controlled that game from start to finish. They had Oklahoma on the ropes the entire time. There were some moments, we were discussing it, where Oklahoma's shooting percentage, they were only hitting, God, what were they at? 20%?
28%.
Something like that. And we talked about it in the first half. Like, they're going to get on a run to where they're going to get back to their average. And they did that, and Texas still controlled the game. But it felt weird, though. We talked about that leaving the Irwin Center. There was a weird feeling about that. You think anytime that your biggest rival comes into town and you beat them by double digits. I mean, I think Texas had a 20-point lead at one point in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The vibe in the building was not what I would call a vibe for Texas beating OU by 20 points at some point, like in the building. Like, it just didn't have the same energy. There's a weird vibe about this team in person.
I agree. And I want to say something, because it's not that it wasn't loud at times. It's not that there wasn't.
Oh, no.
It's not that Texas fans weren't cheering and weren't, like, one of the big knocks is like, well, Texas fans always, seem like they're just unaware of the right times to cheer at a basketball game or whatever.
No.
And it's like, okay, so Texas makes some defensive stops and the crowd's on their feet. And I saw more not standing ovations, but crowd off of their butts and onto their feet at different times here during that game than I'd seen in a while. It was really good to see the crowd get into the game. But the point that we were making about it just feeling like, yeah, we're going to yell and scream, but it did almost feel like that crowd was waiting for the bottom to drop out. And it never did, but it never got below a double-digit lead at any point after they blew it open. It never got down to that where we're sitting there and like, okay, 16-point lead at this TV timeout. The next TV timeout, it was a 12-point lead. And then I looked at you and I said, man, that they need to figure this out.
Yeah,
because
if they get this back down to single digits, this could get
back down to
interesting.
single digits, it's going to be a ball game here. And Texas never looked back, and they just ended up running away with it there at the end. But it did sort of feel like at this point, Texas fans are still just expecting the bottom to drop out, and I think with good reason. because when you see a game like Iowa State yesterday and you go on the road, and Iowa State's a tough team. I mean,
For sure.
It's not a, this is not a, they're a top 15 team. Will probably be ranked 12 or 13 when
Yeah.
when the new poll comes out tomorrow on Monday. There's no shame in losing a game on the road to a top 15 team. But what you can't do is go on the road and turn the ball over 20 times.
No.
You can't go on the road and allow that team to dictate how the game is played, as opposed to you dictating it with your, whether it's the pace that we talk about that we dislike at times, but that's who they are. That's who Texas is. Excuse me. And when you start playing when you have to play the other team's game, that sort of forced Texas into some uncomfortable moments. And like I said, you can't, the shooting was fine. You know, you 8 for 22 from 3-point, you're shooting over 33% from three. That's fine for me. For, you know, some of the twos weren't falling. You only shoot 24 for 52 for 46% from the field. Like, that's not going to get it done on a lot of nights, especially against a team that was as hot as Iowa State. Kerry, I told you when Texas has gotten it down to like a 4-point lead, and a 4-point deficit, I should say.
Yeah.
And we're playing really good defense, and shot clock's running down for Iowa State. And it's about 4 minutes left. I want to say 4 or 5 minutes left. And they heave up a 30-foot shot and it banks in for 3 points. And I said, well, that's it. It's just not going to be Texas's night at this point. And the lead, I don't think the lead ever really got below 6 or 7 for Iowa State after that. So, I mean, what's it going to take, Kerry, for this team to get over that hump against these good teams? Because they haven't beaten anybody. They have like one win against, because some of these different websites or whatever, they sort of break it down into tiers of these teams. And Texas doesn't have a tier 1 victory. They've got one tier 2 victory. They haven't beaten anybody, if we're being honest, this season.
No, they haven't.
We sort of had that discussion. They have not beaten anybody of worth.
What's the best win right now? Oklahoma?
Yeah, I would say Oklahoma. In terms of just, I mean, I don't really feel like there's a better win.
Yeah, I think OU's probably at least from the top, off the top of my head, Oklahoma's probably it might be just recency bias, but for me, that's the best win. Because this group of Big 12 teams, okay, minus Gonzaga and Seton Hall,
that's it.
who Texas lost to. Yeah. But I mean, the Big 12 is where this is going to be the highest quality of opponents they're going to play, obviously. And that's where like Oklahoma, an unranked Oklahoma team, is probably the best win that this team has all season.
Yeah, it is.
It might be by a long shot, honestly.
I think it is. I think you're right. I think it is by a long shot. And that was a good win. It was a good win. Like you said, we were there in the building and sort of saw it unravel. And that's the type of game that Texas wants to play. Like, if you're going to see Texas be successful in the Big 12 in the tournament, it's going to be that type of game. That's the type of game that Texas wants to play.
But this is where this seems to be another kind of recurring theme. And we talk about this team is like, we really are. And I think this is where the hesitancy comes in. The hesitancy comes in from the fan base, is that we are still taking this team as like a game by game case, to where you lose at Oklahoma State, you go, okay, come back against Oklahoma on Tuesday night and let's see what you've got then. And they go, okay, look at what they did against OU, a team that just beat Iowa State, that was playing good ball. Okay, they recovered, they got past that, they didn't let that Oklahoma State game beat them twice, so to say. So then you say, okay, well, now you beat Oklahoma, now show us what you can do up in Ames. And if you can beat Iowa State up in Ames, now you're starting to see maybe this thing getting put together. Well, that wasn't the case. And here we are again, lose to Iowa State. Now we're looking at Kansas State and Oklahoma State back-to-back home games. You have to win these two.
Yes.
And even then, it doesn't necessarily solve the issues. And there we are again. We're going to enter that run where Tennessee's coming to town, a good Tennessee team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, can you take care of business there? And then that just absolutely brutal run starts. And like, we're going to be halfway through conference play. And I still don't know if we're going to know how good this team is or isn't.
No, Texas is going to be on a prove it to me basis the rest of the year, and that's just how this is how it's going to be. Like you said, that's how it has been. We were looking for them to take that next step, and it hasn't happened. And I don't think we're going to ever see it. Honestly, it's just going to be a game by game. What are you going to get? Are you going to get Marcus? Are you going to get the Marcus Carr that we thought we were getting at the beginning of the season, who isn't forcing the basketball, isn't dribble driving into the land of the Giants and not converting? I mean, are some of these more of these 3-point shots going to fall? Like, are you not going to, again, you can't turn the ball over 20
No.
times against anybody, but you sure as hell can't do it against Tennessee, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas, Baylor, Oklahoma. You can't do it. Texas Tech just beat Baylor. I mean, like this conference is ridiculous.
And then Tech turns around and loses.
Yeah, I mean that's just.
And then Baylor lost again.
This is a wild, wild conference. Which honestly, like, if you can take anything from that positively, it's the fact that everybody's going to take losses in this conference.
Texas is 3-2.
Right.
They're better than Iowa State. They have this, like, Texas is still in this Big 12 race, and that's why, like, but you just want to see some consistency. It didn't feel like a single digit loss to Iowa State.
No,
it did not feel that way.
They're still playing like a team that met 2 weeks ago.
Right.
You know, where 9 players come in and they've never played together before, and they're still trying to gel. We keep talking about waiting on this team to gel and finding its way. And I just don't know at this point in the season if we're going to see, if we're going to see it like we originally thought we might, with the way that this sort of all-star team, quote unquote, mentality, with all these players being some of the best players on their individual teams before coming here. I don't know if we're going to actually see that totally come to fruition at this point. And this is going to go one of two ways. Texas is going to find a way to play good basketball and at least be in a lot of these games. Because honestly, the Iowa State game, it did not feel like it was only a single digit loss to me.
No, like at that point in the second half, when you mentioned where Texas got it back within 4, it wasn't so much a feeling of like Texas is like clawing their way back in and going to go force the issue. It felt more like Iowa State was letting it slip.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned like about this going one of two ways. I think we've reached a like kind of critical point with this team.
Sure.
And I think Chris Beard hit the red emergency button in Ames when he put Lacone and Benson in the game and gave them the minutes and Brock Cunningham as early as he did in the second half and for as long of a span that he did.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the point of the season where man management, personality management, and the mental side of coaching is about to come in. And some players, I mean, look, we can criticize, and rightfully so, we can criticize the offensive scheme, the slow pace of play, all the things that we've been, been talking about all season. 20 turnovers is a mental thing. Sloppy play is a mental thing. And seeing some of the sloppy play from some of these guys is just infuriating. And if they're not dialed in, and if they're not, I mean, if their minds just aren't in it, then, maybe Chris Beard needs to sit some of these guys a little bit more.
Well, we saw that. And that was the point, right? That was
Exactly.
Lacone playing 10, 11 minutes. Cunningham, I know that Beard said earlier in the week that Brock Cunningham is a rotational player. I don't know if I buy that necessarily. Like I know that he's the type of player that does the little things that Chris Beard loves. But when you have the talent that you have on the rest of this roster, I don't know that Cunningham is necessarily a 15 to 18
No, no,
minute
no,
a
no, no,
night guy.
no.
But if again, if that's I'm okay with 8 to 10 minutes and giving you a couple floor burns and using up his fouls and things like that. I'm fine with that. But with the talent on this roster, and that's not a knock. This isn't a knock on Brock Cunningham. And I wish when he's in the game and he gets the open look for three that he pulls the trigger. Like but excuse me. I don't think that he's a true, with this roster, he should be a true rotational player, especially as we keep talking about these rotations shrinking and him only going to 7 or 8 guys. And then all of a sudden you get this Iowa State game and everybody and their mom are playing. Benson's getting 6 minutes. And it's like, well, this is, like, again, like I know Benson works hard in practice and he's a good student and all that stuff. He's earned his time, as Chris Beard likes to say, but has he? Like, look at this roster. Were you sending a message there?
Oh,
Was that,
absolutely.
is that a thing where you're just sending a message to the rest of the guys? Like, I will sit your ass and I don't care. Like, if you're going to go out there and play that poorly, is that a message? That's shots fired to you?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it was for me.
Yeah.
This wasn't anything about talent. Because if this was about talent, no offense to these guys we're talking about, they wouldn't see the floor until garbage time. And that's typically been the case. Lacone was getting garbage, mop up minutes. And for him to get as much time as he did, yesterday says a lot. Same thing with Benson. This was absolutely a message to the players on this team that are either just not dialed in or whatever it is. And that's where it's, if you're not going to be dialed in, if you're not going to be mentally there and put in the effort and be focused and all those kinds of things, then Beard's going to sit them. And honestly, I'm fine with that because I'd rather, this is an opportunity to fix this right here with these 2 home games. And we'll find out pretty quickly against Kansas State, like who's dialed in, who's actually focused and ready to play, and who wants to like put it all out there. Because it doesn't, I'm not going to put a lot on Timmy Allen for the 2 foul calls early on. I think that was some Big 12 chicanery that from the looks of it's really soft calls there. I don't blame, I'm not going to put that on Timmy Allen and be like, oh, the guy wasn't dialed in and Beard had to sit him. But like the turnovers to me are the big thing. Like if you're not focused and you're not dialed in, you're not protecting the ball, you're not doing the little things. Like, and that's not even a little thing. That's not a little thing. It's protecting the basketball. Like when Marcus Carr turns around and throws that pass back, I don't know if it was Andrew Jones, whoever he was looking for there, and there was nobody within 6 feet. And he just throws it right back into the backcourt in that first half yesterday. It's like, what are you doing? Like
mental.
It's mental. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know kind of where I'm going with this, but it's just, I think he hit the emergency button on, you guys need to, like, if you're not focused, I'm going to play guys that are at least going to go out there and put effort in. And we kind of know, I mean, we know what we're going to get from Andrew Jones every night. We know what we're going to get from Ramey. We got to get, I don't know if it's just the transfer issue or like some of these guys that are fairly new and, trying to find their way. I think they're still trying to gel, but like, there's one thing to just say like, oh, there's not a lot of chemistry versus like, this guy doesn't even look like he's got his head in the game. Like he even wants to be there.
It's got to change. Otherwise, this experiment this year is going to be a failure here unless we see some of these guys get their heads in the game, and hopefully Beard's not wearing them down in practice, and like, because he can be a tough one to deal with, just his style. Like, yeah, they get to do all this fun stuff, and you get to the darty at the tower and all the like you see that side of Beard, but coaches in practices are different than coaches in front of people. It's just how it is. Like, especially basketball coaches. Like, it's just the nature of it. You also have to know as a coach, though, when your team has the daubers down and know when to dial it back.
Well, and I think
And
that's what maybe I'm making more of this than it is, but I think that was the case in Ames. I think it was like, you know what, this isn't our day. Some of you guys aren't here. I'm gonna get into your ass in practice over the next few days. We're gonna let some of these other guys get on the floor and show what they can do.
could be, but whatever it is, this upcoming schedule isn't going to allow for the bullshit. So
No,
they can either figure it out, or Lacone is going to be playing 18 minutes against top 10 opponents if they don't
well,
figure this shit out real quick. You know,
and the problem is you got to find wins in here.
Mhm.
As difficult as the conference slate is, you have to find wins in there somewhere. And because that non-conference schedule is not going to help Texas's case with the tournament committee if this team flounders through the Big 12 and finishes in the bottom tier of it. It's just not. As
Mhm.
hard as the Big 12 is, like, you got to find wins in there. And I trust Beard's track record because that's really all we're going off of at this point, because he hasn't been at Texas long enough for us to see it here. But I'm going off Beard's track record. I trust him to navigate this. And if he doesn't, then he doesn't. But at least going off of what he was able to do at Texas Tech, I trust him to push the buttons. Now, we're not going to see exciting high flying offense. I think we can already basically like write that off. We know what we're going to get. But can he manage the personalities? Can he manage the effort? Can he push the right buttons to get some wins here? Because they, they're
Gotta
3-2, but they got to have them. So
yeah, nobody around the country is taking Texas seriously right now. So
no,
and with good reason. So we'll see how it goes. But hey, man, let's move on. Let's wrap this show up here with a little. Let's wrap it up in La Zona Verde with some Austin FC news. What you got, man?
let's do it. Some more roster moves. Tomas Pochettino heading down to River Plate in Argentina on loan. We were talking about this last show. It looked like his departure was imminent. It's official. It's just a loan right now, but I feel like he will not be returning to Austin at some point. I think that loan's going to be made permanent eventually.
Right.
Just didn't work for him in Austin. He's a designated player, big talent, but it just didn't work. I don't know if it was the system or if it was a personal thing, whatever it was, that just kept him from seeming to click here. So he's moved on. Johan Valencia signed. I am really, really high on this signing. This is a guy, young player out of Colombia, played for the Colombian champions. And you mentioned this before, you can always tell the quality of a player by how the reaction from the fans are whenever he leaves. They were not happy about losing him, the fans there in Colombia, from Deportivo Cali. And he was this guy is a midfield destroyer. You think about pairing him up with Alex Ring. This is going to allow Alex Ring to get forward and actually get involved in the attack more, because this guy can just take care of all the defensive duties in the midfield. He's going to be a fan favorite, I think, because just the work rate that this guy puts in. Not a big guy, but just a hard worker, not afraid of anything. And I just love this signing. And it's not a designated player signing, which is huge. Like, it was a good transfer fee. He's going to get paid well, but to bring in a player like this as a non-designated player says a lot. So we had the MLS draft, which was Austin had the number 5 pick in the draft. And thankfully, to whatever draft decisions the teams in front of Austin were making, the number 1 guy that was basically pegged as kind of being the number 1 pick in the draft, the best defender in the draft, Kip Keller, falls to Austin at number 5. So addresses, some of the center back issues that Austin was looking at. What do you think about any of these roster moves, Jay? How you feeling about this team as we approach preseason?
Yeah, Pochettino, we knew that was basically it was all a done deal before the last time we recorded, and then they just made it official. Wish the guy well at his next spot. Just didn't work, like you said. Valencia is a guy that I feel is also going to allow, not only let Ring play a little more forward, but depending on the formation that Josh Wolf is playing, it's going to allow Danny Pereira to also, move a little bit more forward. I think we're gonna see a little bit more speed out of him. Let's say they go some sort of 3-3-4 sort of a setup, and allowing Pereira to sort of play a little bit more on the wing, or however they need it to work, because that guy's just a bundle of speed, and to be able to get him a little more forward and a little more active in the offensive side of the field, I think will work wonders for this club in scoring some goals. So that's exciting to me. And the Keller pick, when we watched the goalkeeper go before him, we watched some guys go that you sort of look and say, okay, these teams must be drafting for need and not necessarily for, best player on the board, because when Keller falls to 5, it's best case scenario for Austin FC at that point to immediately fill a need there, and
the best player on the board, like that perfect combination of
right
best available and a need addressed.
He was probably the number 1 player on their board, and like you said, the best player available. So like when you have that workout, it's sort of a thing where you sit there and you thank the soccer gods, and you thank whoever else to that it worked out that way. And then with their next pick, they took a
I was left
an
back
outside
depth,
defender,
right?
yeah, left back, yeah. So I mean, again, like they're addressing what needed to be addressed. Some of the things we can't depend on Lima every game, although Lima was a guy that was in my doghouse early on that really ended up shining as the season went on, and we really saw why he was viewed so highly early on in his career in MLS, and we really saw that as the season progressed. But to get some more depth on defense, and to be able to address it and not panic. You see these teams that so often it's just like, what should we do this? And Austin had a very clear plan of what they wanted to do going into the super draft, and it looks like it's worked out really nicely, and couldn't be more pleased with Keller falling to them at 5, and hopefully he'll be able to adjust to the MLS style and fit in and give them minutes right away, because they're going to need it.
Yeah, and I think there's still a couple senior roster spots available. And so I think there's still going to be some moves made to where I think that the back line is going to get addressed. I think they're going to try to go after a big time center back signing. At least a proven starter at center back. So you don't have to rely on Keller and Kleeman and those kind of guys to have to play consistent minutes, and let them develop. So, but then basically you've got Romagna and Cascante is really your only 2 there, right there. And, Cascante was solid. Romagna showed promise, but like that's not enough depth there, because right behind that is essentially 2 rookies and guys that haven't adjusted to the professional game yet. So if you don't want Alex Ring having to drop back and play center back anymore, which completely negates everything that we were just talking about with the midfield and trying to advance the ball forward and actually score goals this season. That needs to be addressed, and I think they will. And it's coming up soon. We've got a announcement, the preseason friendly that's happening. I mean, what is it? It's January 16th today. This is happening February 16th. The Mexican champions, Atlas, out of Guadalajara, are coming to town. And I went to the Tigres friendly last season. That was a mid-season one. COVID stuff. That was that was a blast. I mean, that was extremely entertaining just to have all the Tigres fans in the house. We had a blast there. That was was awesome. Atlas is going to be great too. I mean, they're going to bring in a big crowd. I mean, they're the defending champs of Mexico. What can you say? These are some high quality friendlies they're bringing into town. It might not be any big European names for the casual fan, but like these are really solid, and especially with the way that Austin's trying to grow the game or grow the fan base and really you know, especially throughout South Texas and trying to get into, you know, basically building relationships with clubs in Mexico. It's really great to see.
Bingo. Yeah, yeah, and it's not. And Austin Q2 is already such a great environment, and when you're bringing it, it's like know the people in your area, know the people that are going to help you to always have that environment. And whether it's bringing in these big names from the Mexican leagues or whatever it is, like you said, like these are the people that will be there night in and night out supporting that club, and to be able to bring in a team like the defending Mexican League champions. And then last year, like you said, with how they brought in, it was like they get it. This club gets
exactly.
it. We have not one time questioned whether or not this franchise, this club gets it from the front office perspective. And all things point to this being a well-run club, a club that understands what it's going to need to be successful, not just on a league level, but on a local level as well. And it's good to see that them continuing to foster those relationships and bring that stuff in. Good on Austin FC. Good on Claudio Reyna, Josh Wolf, and everybody there in the front office. It's nice to see that. Nice to see a well-run franchise.
Yeah. Well, and on that note about them getting it, apparently there was a friendly in the works, or basically it was kind of a done deal, but COVID issues kind of caused it. But it was going to be Tigres versus River Plate from Argentina. The club Pochettino went to, one of the biggest clubs in South America. That says a lot that Tigres would essentially be hosting such a massive Argentine club in Austin. In Austin.
Yep.
So you have to think that they had a great experience when they came up last season. And the fact that they were like, hey, let's play another friendly there. Let's do something for the massive Tigres fan base in Texas, and also host another one of the giants of the South American game. And but yeah, it sounds like with COVID and everything, River had to call that off. But that would have been a cool experience. But yeah, they understand it. They're embracing the game here locally, and it's I'm getting excited for this season. We should have some more roster management news. But yeah, we're only a month out from the Atlas friendly. So, well, man, what else do we got? I think we get hit on a lot today. Good show.
Yeah, we covered it all. I think locally, we'll hit on some baseball here coming up as the Runnin Horns are going to start their season here pretty soon. We'll get a little bit of a preview in on that and talk about what those, how this team is going to look, and talk about some of the players that we'll need to know, and that Texas fans will want to pay attention to as the season goes on. But yeah, man, I think we covered it all today. Great show. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for listening. As always, smash that subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. See y'all later.
Welcome.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.
Falling on 6 on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing down?